Okay, in this tutorial, you'll learn how to have your character walk. As your character walks, you'll have the appearance of your character holding their blaster weapon. Your character will be able to have the appearance of jumping with their blaster weapon. When you left click and hold the mouse, your character will fire the blaster weapon. Wherever the mouse moves, your character will aim at the mouse. When the mouse goes the other direction, your character will flip to aim with the mouse. You'll learn how to do that. Also, if you notice, when I left click on the mouse, the character shakes. So the character is actually shaking as the character fires the blaster weapon. So that's what you're going to learn as you work your way through this tutorial. Hi, this is Ali Arango for Game Visuals as well as LittleGuyCGI.com. Today we'll be working on a blaster or bolt tutorial in Gdevelop 5. We'll be covering subjects such as having your player character shake as they hold their blaster projectile, having the blaster follow your mouse as you move the mouse around to aim, also having your player character adjust which way it's positioned as you move your mouse around. As usual, with the tutorials on this channel, the sprites will be provided to you. You'll be able to find them in the tutorial description area. So let's get started. Okay, when doing tutorials, I like to start from a fresh start-off screen like you see in front of you. What we're going to do is we're going to left click on create a new project. We're going to scroll down from this create a new game menu. We're then going to select empty game. Now that we have this empty game, we're going to look to our left. We see this project menu here. We're going to click the plus button to make a new scene. We're then going to left click on this new scene. And when we clicked on that new scene, we see an object menu to the left. We see our properties menu to the, or our objects menu to the right, our properties menu to the left. So now we're ready to get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on our player character. I'm going to go to the right. I'm going to click the plus button. Under our objects menu, we have an add new object menu pop up. I'm going to select sprite by left clicking on it. I'm going to go to object name. I'm going to change this to player. Now I'm going to go to the right. I'm going to click the plus button. We see a plus button to the left. I'm going to click on that. And now what we're going to do is look for where our sprites are located at. And for this, we only want one sprite. So here's the sprite right here. Then I'm going to click open. And then for this, where we see animation 0, I'm going to click here and name this idle. So that's going to be our idle animation. So when our character is not moving, we will see this. Now when I bring in another animation, I'm going to click the plus to the right. I'm going to click the plus to the left. And I'm going to look for where these sprites are at. And these are walking sprites. So I'm going to left click here. So here we have all of these sprites right here. So with all of these sprites right here, I'm going to hold control. While holding control, I'm going to press A. That selected all of the sprites. And then you can see like there's check marks on all of the sprites. I'm then going to click open. So now all of these sprites are here in Gdevelop. And this is going to be a looping animation. So see where it says don't loop? We're going to click here. When we click here, now it says loop. So now this will be a looping animation. So what we can do is click preview. And this shows the speed that our character is moving at. This is fine. I'm going to click OK. So we're going to add another action in. Well, let's name this. So this first one frame here, we have this named idle, right? This we're going to name this walk. Now we're going to go to this plus to the right. We're going to click there. Scroll down. We're going to click this plus to the left. And what we're looking for is jumping sprites. So I'm going to go to sprites. So then I have these blaster jumping. So I'm going to left click here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold control, press A like I did before, then click OK. So now we have these sprites in here. These jumping sprites, we actually don't want these to loop. So we'll leave this as this is here. We'll click here and we'll name this jump. So now that we have all of these sprites here, we're going to click apply. Okay, so here's our player right here. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. So this is our area that we're going to have our game in. I'm going to left click on our player. When I left click on the player, you can see this is highlighted blue. Now that it's highlighted blue, I'm going to left click, drag this to the side. And here is our player right here. Now this player has all of the sprites connected to it. Remember the one idle sprite that we clicked? This is what you see right here. This is going to be our whole screen. So we don't want the player character to be this big. So I'm going to hold shift. While I'm holding shift, I'm going right over this box right here. I'm left clicking and dragging. And now just let go of shift. So now the player character is going to be about that big on the screen. Okay, what we want to do is have the player character have something to stand on. So we're going to go to this plus button to the right underneath our objects menu. We're going to left click here. We're going to select we'll go to tiled sprite. We're going to go to object name. We're going to name this ground. Then what we're going to do is go to this paintbrush here. We're going to left click on that. Once we left click, we see the words edit with Piskel. We want to go right over those words, then left click on those words. This opens up the built-in graphic editor inside of Gdevelop. We're going to go near the bottom left, click here. I'm just going to make this a brown color by left clicking and dragging. Then I'm going to left click and drag in the color here. And then what I'm going to do is go to the paint bucket, click here. I'm going to go to this file here. You don't have to change the name of this file. This is going to be the name of the actual ground here. I'm just choosing to do this, but this won't affect the actual programming. So I'm going to make this somewhat darker. Click the paint bucket again, click here. And then now I'm going to click save. So now we basically have this ground graphic here we just made up. What we're going to do is click on this behaviors right here. When we click that, we see this purple line goes right underneath there. With this purple line underneath there, we're going to go to our right, left click on plus. Then we're going to click a behavior. Behavior is one of the very nice things in Gdevelop that allows you to quickly set up games. I'm going to click platform behavior. And then I'm going to click apply. Okay, with that set up, I'm going to left click on ground. You can see this is highlighted blue. Now that it's highlighted blue, I'm going to left click and drag onto our screen right here. I'm going to put this underneath the player. I'm going to go, we have these three squares here. The top square to the right. I'm going to drag this out. So now this platform has this ground has a platform behavior on it. So what this will do is this will act like in the game world, like an actual ground now. So for things like our player, once this player has a behavior put on it, which it doesn't right now, this player will be able to interact with the ground. So let's put put a behavior on our player character. So we're going to left click here. When we left click here, we come back in the scene you saw us previously working in. We have our different animations here. We also have this behaviors button here. We're going to left click on behaviors. Now we have this purple line underneath behaviors. We're going to click plus, and then we're going to click on platform character. Now these are different options you see popping up here to make this a platform character. And what this is this is just very nice to have the character be able to move, have gravity. This is very good stuff. So now we're going to click apply with the default settings. And now just with that set up, we're going to click the play button to preview this. You can see our player character fell. Here's the ground it's standing on. So the behaviors are working together. When I push to the right with an arrow key, the player character moves, but we still have to set up the animation for the player character. The player character is actually also hovering above the ground. We need to set that up as well. So it looks like the player character is actually standing on the ground. So I'm going to click this X to get out of this preview. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click on our player character. So I clicked, it's highlighted blue. Now I'm going to double click. I'm going to scroll down. We have these two options, edit hitboxes as well as edit points. We want to go to edit hitboxes. I'm going to left click here. The reason why we're in here is to make things look like our character is actually standing on the ground. We're going to scroll down. See right here, this is important. See how these are highlighted blue? Share same collision mask for all animations. Share same collision mask for all sprites of this animation. It's important that these are highlighted blue. What we're going to do is, let me show you this. This box right here, when we bring a sprite in, the sprite automatically has a collision box put on it by Gdevelop. So when you look here, see how this box comes down here? See the space here? This is the space that's making it look like our character is above the platform. So we need to reduce this space to bring it up to about here. The way we can do that is we're going to click use a custom collision mask. We're going to left click there. Once we do that, we have to click this plus button to the right. Now we see these 4 dots here. So what we want to do is we're going to grab this one dot, or both of these, pull these down. This is basically going to be what our character stands on. So we're making this so that the character will basically interact with the platform from right here. So since this is above where the bottom of the character is at, this should make it look like the character is actually standing on the ground. We need to pull these dots up so that they're near the top of the character, because basically Gdevelop is going to be looking at these at this area to just work with our characters. How does our character interact with the world? So what I'm doing now is just adjusting this to try to make it fairly square-like and to make sure that it's around our character. It doesn't have to be totally around our character, just the main mass of the character. With that done, I'm going to click close, and then I'm going to click apply. Now I'm going to click this preview button. And now our character is not sitting, hovering above this. Now the character looks like it's behind here. This is because of the Z order of things. We'll fix this, but the collision mask is correct. So what I'm going to do is click here. When I click on a character, see this properties panel right here? This Z order determines the order of things from front to back. So 1 is all the way back, 2 is not all the way back. So when we're clicked on a player character, its Z order is 1, which is all the way back. When we click on the ground, its Z order is 2. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click on a player character, which is 1. I'm going to change this Z order actually to 4. And then just click off. Here, everything disappeared because I clicked right here. But now when I clicked here, you can see the Z order's 4. The Z order for this is 2. So now with the Z order for this ground being 2, and our player character's Z order being 4, that 4 Z order should make it seem like our character's actually standing on this ground now. So let's click the preview button. And now you can see it looks like our player character is actually standing on the ground now, which is what we want. Okay, now let's set things up so that our player character animates when it moves. So right here we're in this this scene, which is called new scene, right? This is where we do our artwork, where we work with our artwork. We bring sprites in, pull them on into our main screen. We're going to click on new scene events. Now in this area is where we actually do our visual programming at. So the first thing we want to do is look to this plus button, or this looks like a box with a plus button on it. It says add new event. Add new empty event. We hover over this. We're going to left click on this. Then we did that. We see this add condition and then add actions. Add condition, add action. In Gdevelop, the way that things work are that condition pretty much says when something happens, and then action says what to do when that something happens. So what we want to do is the first thing we're doing is we're setting up animation for our player character. So we're going to click add action. And we're going to go and look for our platform behavior. We're going to left click here. And then what we're going to do is we're looking for when our player character is on the floor. So we're going to left click here. So then this is saying check if the object is on a platform. This is our player character. We're going to click player. And then with that done, we're going to click OK. Okay, in Gdevelop, there's multiple ways of doing things. This is a way that's fairly quick, as this is a Blaster tutorial, not mainly an animation tutorial. We're going to take the fairly quick way that works well. So what we first have is we have this event right here. The event is composed of a condition as well as an action. Now we want a sub-event. A sub-event will be dependent on this. What's that mean? That means that everything that is a sub-event after this will deal with the fact that our player character is on the floor. Hopefully, as we work our way through it, this will make more sense to you. So it's important that where you click at in Gdevelop, right? See when I click on the bottom of this, see this blue outline, this blue line is underneath both our condition and our action. If I click, okay, there's nothing there to click on. Here we go. If I click here, see how this is just, when I say this selection is just on the players on the floor. It's important where you click. So when I click here, we're just on the conditions on the floor. When I click here, we have this blue outline going over the whole event. Right now, we want this outline to be over the whole event. And then we want to go to this button right here, and we hover over it. We see it says add a sub event to the selected event. So we're going to left click on that. And now we have a sub event. A sub event is composed of a condition as well as an action. Like I previously mentioned, it's dependent on this condition here though. Okay, so what are we going to do with this sub event? We're going to click add condition. We're going to go to platform behavior, similar to what we did before. This time we're going to go to is moving, and then we're dealing with the player. So we're going to left click on player. Then we're going to click OK. Okay, when we were setting up our player character, we brought in sprites for animations, and we name those animations. And those names are important. The reason why those names are important is because we're going to use them to help set up the animation for our player character. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click add action. So a condition says when the player is moving, and then action says what do you want to happen. That's what we're setting up now. So we're going to click add action. We're going to go to sprite, animations and images. Gdevelop it's very nice because it is something that the way it's set up is it just makes sense to me as an artist. On this channel, we try to focus on making games from the artist perspective, and just want to point out it's nice because whenever you're new to a program, you're going to have to work with the program to figure things out. However, within a fairly short amount of time, as you work with Gdevelop, things make they make sense. So anyway, what we want to do is we're going to go to where we see change the animation by name. So we're going to left click here. The animation we want to work with as far as the object, or the object we want to work with is the player. So we're going to click that. So here's the animation name. So we need to put in the exact name that we put for the animation that we want to happen, which is the walk animation. So we named it walk. So I'm going to left click here. And I put in walk. Now I put in quotations. I put this walk in quotations. In Gdevelop, there's certain words that are made by Gdevelop, and typically you might not have to put in quotations. However, when we choose to name something, often that what we choose to name that name is going to be in between quotations, letting Gdevelop know that we made it. When you work with Gdevelop, like I named this walk. So I would recommend that you be careful of naming things. Like make a choice if you want to have something say walk or walking, because you can forget. So if you get used to saying, okay, I want to have something walk and jump, and instead of having walking, you name it walk, or jumping, you name it jump, then you can sit there and say, oh yeah, I don't tend to put ings on things. So in saying that, you can always go back and then check just by clicking on the player object. So with this set up, we're going to click OK. Okay, now I'm going to click the play button or preview button. So you can see here's our player character here. So now when I press walk, our character walks. However, the character doesn't turn around and the character doesn't stop walking. So we're going to click the X button, get out of that preview. Okay, so let's set things up so that the player character stops walking once they stop walking. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on player is on the floor, because whether a character is moving or not moving, the player is still important that we know that Gdevelop knows that the player is on the floor. So with this first condition clicked on, so we have this highlighted blue going underneath the condition as well as the action. Now what we're going to click is we're going to click add a sub event to the selected event. So now you can see here's this new sub event, right? So we're going to click add condition. We're going to go down to platform behavior, and we're going to go to is moving. We're going to select player. Now what we want to do is work with when the character isn't moving. So what we can do is, even though we click is moving, we can click this invert the condition. So this means the player is not moving. So when the player isn't moving, this is what we want to happen. So now we're going to click OK. Okay, so we need to say, for this condition, when the player is not moving, what to do. So we're going to click add action. We're going to go to sprites, animations and images. We're going to go to change the animation by name. We're going to click the player because that's the object we're working with. Then we're going to go quotation. We're putting in the name of what we want to happen when the character isn't moving, which is the idle animation. So we're going to click OK. So now with that done, we're going to click this preview button. So now when our character walks and then our character stops walking, you can see that our character goes back to our idle animation. However, when we push the opposite way, the character walks like it's going backwards. We need to set that up. So I'm going to click this X button to get out of this preview menu. Okay, so how do we set that up? We're going to click on this main event. We have this highlighted blue underneath this main event condition as well as the action. We're going to click add a sub event. We're going to click add a condition. We're going to go to keyboard, and then we're going to do is select key pressed. Now we can type in the key. What we want is the right arrow key. So I'm going to hold shift, press R. This is capital for these arrow buttons. So here's right. We can see Gdevelop saying, "Oh, is this the button?" So I'll left click on right. That's the button we want to work with. Then we're going to click OK. So with that done, we want to have things that basically what we're doing now is we're setting things up so that the character will turn when we try to, go the opposite direction, so the character isn't walking backwards. So we're going to click add action. We're going to go to sprite. This time, where previously we were going to animations and images, this time we're going to effects. So now what we're going to do is flip the object horizontally. We're going to select the player, since that's what we're working with. And we have this thing that says activate flipping. We're going to select no. Then we're going to click OK. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to click back on this again because we want a sub event of this event, not a sub event of this. We're going to click that sub event button. And what we can do is we can click here. We can copy this and paste this. For this one, we're just going to do this again just because I think this is important. If this happens to be your first tutorial in Gdevelop, I'll go through this quickly. Keyboard, key pressed. Click here, hold shift, press L, left pops up, we'll click here, click OK, we'll click add an action, we'll go to sprite, we're not going to animations and images, we're going to effects, we're going to flip the object horizontally, that object is the player, and then for left, we do want to click activate flipping, and then click OK. So you might say, well, what is the deal with activate flipping? If you bring in a character pointed to the right, when you have things set up like, pointed to the right, so point it that way, as far as like them looking like they're walking this way, this setup will work where the right key is pressed, horizontal, flipped no, and then left is flip yes. Now, if you bring in a sprite and the character is is facing towards the left, you're going to have to do the opposite of this. So we don't have to get that much into it. This should work for what we have here. So what we're going to do is click preview to make sure. Now when we're standing there, our character's in idle, we push the right key, our character walks. Now when we push the left key, our character, is walking like they're supposed to. So I'm going to click so I was just going back and forth between the keys. So I'm going to press the X button to get out of that preview. Okay, so we have another animation to set up. That is the jump animation. Now, for all of this, our character, see, these sub-events are dependent on this main event. The character is on the floor. When we jump, our character is not on the floor, so we're going to click here to highlight here. However, when we highlighted here before, and when I'm saying highlighting, I mean we're highlighting the event here as far as the condition as well as the action. We click the sub-event before. We don't want a sub-event because this isn't dealing with the character being on the floor, our player character. Our character is jumping. So now we're going to go to add a new empty event. And we can see that this is not underneath here. This is its own new event, not dependent on this. Okay. So we're going to click add condition. We're going to go down to platform behavior and we're going to go to is jumping. We're going to left click there. We're going to choose the object, which is the player. We're then going to click OK. Okay, so now we're saying when the character is jumping, what do we want to happen? We're going to click add action. We're going to go to sprite, sprite, actions and animations. We're going to select change the animation by name. We're going to click player because that's the object we're working with. We're going to put quotations because this is a name that we gave for this animation. We're then going to click OK. So now with that set up, we're going to click the preview button to test this out. So let's make sure that our character's in idle animation. They're like they're supposed to be. Character's walking forward, walking back. Now when we press jump, the character is almost doing like we want. Now one thing the character is doing, see how the character looks like it's bending down? So the character is, for the most part, working. So it's jumping. However, we can adjust the animation. So we're going to go to new scene, double click on the player. We're going to go to jump. And our character is already standing up for the most part in this position. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click. When I right click this selected here, I'm then going to click delete selection. All right. You want to right click. When you right click, you get this check mark. Then you select delete selection. So there's some extra frames in here we don't need. So I'm right clicking, delete selection, delete selection. So we have 2 frames of the character jumping down. Then we have a bunch of frames of the character jumping up. I'm going to select delete selection from there. So we have the character jumping down and then the character jumping up. Let's click the preview button. That looks good to me. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click apply. Now let's click the preview button to see how this works. So we're going to press the space bar key. Okay, I'm going to click out of here, click back on player. Let's go back to jump. Let's take away this other one. Let's click apply. Click the preview button again. Okay, that's better. So now I'm going to click this X button to get out of that preview menu. Okay, this tutorial is about our blaster. Let's bring in the actual blaster. You saw it when the character walked as well as when it jumped. However, you can see right here the character is not holding anything right there. So what we're going to do is click this plus button to the right. We're going to go to sprite. We're going to name this blaster. We're going to click this plus button to the right. We're going to click the plus button to the left. We're going to go to where our blaster is at. We're going to go into our folder. So I have these 2. I had this one that had more of a 3D view. Then I have this one that's like basically like 2D, easier to see. So I'm going to click this one, then click open. We don't need any behaviors on this. I'm then going to click apply. I'm going to left click here. This highlighted the blaster blue. And then with it highlighted blue, I'm going to left click and drag this out. So now what we want to do is this is obviously too big. I'm going to hold shift. Shift helps us to constrain this sprite. So by holding shift and using my mouse to go to the side, we can shrink the sprite down. I'll let go of shift now. And I'm seeing how this looks. That looks about good to me. So this doesn't have to be right on your sprite. We just need this to be the general size that it needs to be. Make this somewhat smaller. It's also good to have this, the way we're setting this up, to have this generally be, see this square around the blaster, to have the size be so that this is generally in the center of your character is a good thing as well. So we're going to move this up like that. Okay, there's a few things that need to be done to this blaster. So we're going to left click here to highlight it blue. We're going to double click. Then we're going to look to where we see this edit hitbox as well as edit points. I'm going to left click on edit points. And then basically what happens when you bring a sprite in is we have this point right here, which is our origin point. We have our center point here as well. We need another point to have the actual blaster bolts come out of this blaster, which is going to be right here. So I'm going to scroll down and we can see here's our origin point. Here's our center. We're going to click this plus button here, which gives us a new point. I'm going to name this SP for shooting point. I'm then going to click here and then enter in 90. Now when I put in this 90, I'm only putting that there so I can see the point. So that made the point be right here. So now I'm going to drag the point. So again, the 90 was just so I could get to see this. It would bring it out in a way where it's easy for me to grab. Because as I grab this, you can see like these numbers here change. So I'm going to take this point and put this point right to the front of our blaster. So I'm going to put it right there. And then I'm going to click, I'm going to scroll down, click close, then I'm going to click apply. Okay, as you see, our blaster is above the player. We need to set up code so the blaster stays with the player. So we're going to click on our new scene events. We're going to click here. The reason why we're clicking here is so we can have this blue line here. This is its own event. We want to make a separate event that's not connected to this. So with this highlighted blue where this entire event is selected, we're going to click this plus button here to add a new empty event. Okay, in Gdevelop, just clicking here. And Gdevelop, a condition says when something happens, then an action says what to do when that something happens. So you set a condition, and then when that condition is met, you set an action to happen when that condition is met. If you don't have a condition set here, then basically what happens is Gdevelop takes the action and it constantly does it. Pretty much does it all the time. So this is the case we're going to do as far as setting up this gun. So we're going to click add action. Then we're going to go to common action for all objects. We're going to go to position. So then we have these different options here. We want to go to this one that says put an object around another. So we're going to left click here. So now this wants to know what is the object you want to put around another. And you can see it says position an object around another with the specified angle and distance. The center of the objects are used for positioning them. So we're going to click blaster. So this is the object that we're putting on or around another object. Now we're going to click here and select player. So for the rest of these settings, we're going to leave them default. Then we're going to click OK. Okay, so what we're going to do is click on the preview button so we can see how this works out. So you can see here is the blaster. So now when we walk, the blaster moves right with the player. However, the blaster is there when the character is walking. And you can see the character when the character is walking, it has another blaster as well as when it's jumping. So now we have to deal with that. Okay, so as far as dealing with that, we have this event right here that's dealing when the character is moving. When the character is not moving, if I click here and I don't press anything, you can see this looks good as far as the position of the blaster, right? It's when the character moves. So I'm going to click to go out of preview. So what we can do is use this event right here. Make sure we clicked on this so we have this outline going around the condition as well as the action. Then we can click this button here, which is add a, when we hover over this, we can see it says add a sub-event to the selected event. So we'll click this, and now we have this sub-event to work with. We'll click here so we can work with this sub-event. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to take this sub-event, which is dependent on this event right here. So this only happened when the player is moving. We'll click Add Action. We'll go to Sprite, Visibility, and then change Sprite Opacity. The object that we want to work with is the blaster. The modification sign is equal to. And then for the setting, 0 will be invisible. 255 will be fully visible. So we're going to click here and then click 0 for the setting. We're then going to click OK. So that means when the player is moving, the blaster will be invisible. So if we click this preview button, we can see our blaster is here. Now when we walk, we didn't see the blaster. Now when you stop, the blaster isn't there now, so we can deal with that. Actually, let me click this again. We want to set this up so that when we jump, we don't see the blaster as well. So that's fairly easy to deal with because of Gdevelop's copy and paste feature. So here is our event for jumping, right? So what we'll do is click on this event with this highlighted blue. So this, condition any event is highlighted. We'll click the add sub-event button. So then we'll go to this action here. We'll left click on the action. Normally we've been clicking beneath here. So we have the condition as well as the event highlighted. We have just this highlighted. We'll right click, select copy, and then we'll go to this sub-event that we made here. We'll hover right over add action. Let's click here first. And now this is highlighted. We'll hover over add action. Then we'll right click and select paste. So now we have this saying when the player is jumping, turn the blaster invisible. So now if we click the preview button, here is our idle. We walk. Now when we jump, the same thing, we don't see the blaster. So as far as jumping, as far as walking, things are good. Now we need to set things up so we have the blaster visible after we move or jump. Okay, to do that, what we're going to do is this is when our character isn't moving. We're going to click here. So we have the condition as well as the action highlighted, right? We're going to click add a sub-event. We're going to left click here. We're then going to right click, select copy. We're then going to left click here to have this sub-event highlighted. We're going to hover over this add action. We're going to right click and then select paste. Okay, so this is when we have when the character is not moving, we want the blaster to be visible. So we copied and pasted it here. What's nice is we don't have to go and find the code, so we can just double click here. 0 means invisible, 255 means fully visible. So we'll put in 255 and then we'll click OK. Okay, so now with that done, let's click the preview button. So now when we walk and then stop walking, our character has the blaster. When the character jumps, the character looks correct. So that is good. So I'm going to click this X button to get out of that preview. Okay, as far as this tutorial, one of my goals was I wanted to show how to have a player character holding a blaster type weapon, and basically to have this work correctly, like you see how, let me hit the preview button. I was trying to figure out how to have the character, animate. First I had an idle animation, and I am still learning about the point system, so I wasn't sure how to have the gun move slightly up and down as the character did its idle animation. So I went to a just a one frame animation, right? When I pressed the jump button, I wanted the character originally to be able to fire while the character was jumping. However, again, trying to position the blaster correctly, I basically just went to having the blaster disappear, and it looks like the character is jumping with the blaster. So from that, the blaster doesn't shoot while you're in the air. The same thing while you're walking. For things to look best for my current solution is, just to have the blaster not look like it's there. Again, I just pressed the X button to exit out of that preview. So what we're going to do is we're going to set things up so that they work when the character is not moving. So with this clicked on, we're going to click to make another sub event. What we're going to do now that we have this sub event, we need to make something that actually fires out of this blaster. So we're going to click this plus button here. We're going to go to sprite. We're going to name this blast. We're going to click the plus button. That was to the right. We're going to click the edit with pistol option. And then what we're going to do is look to our upper right. When we see this to the upper right, we see width, height. This is going to let us resize this area right here. For the width, what we want to do is we're going to type in 20. And for the height, we're going to type in 5. And then after we do that, we're going to go to this yellow resize. We're going to left click on that yellow resize, and you can see this area is resized. I'm going to click on this color area down here. I left clicked and dragged here. I want an orangish color. So now I'm going to left click and drag to get that orange color. I'm going to go to the paint bucket, click here, go to this name of this image that we're working on. I'm going to name this blast. This is something I'm choosing to do. You don't need to do this to have the code work. I'm going to click save. So now we have our blast right here. So with that done, I'm going to click apply. Okay, so we're going to click on new scene and events. We have this sub event right here. Now this is underneath this event that says player is not moving. That's what this is. The player is not moving. So what we're going to do is we're going to make things go so that when we click our left mouse button, our character fires that blast that we just made out of its blaster. So we're going to click add condition. See this mouse and touch? We're going to left click on there. And we have these different options: mouse button released, mouse button pressed or touch held. This is what we want. We want the mouse button pressed or touch held. So we're going to left click there. So then this says button to test. We're going to left click here. We're going to select left primary. And then we're going to click OK. Okay, so we're like when the left mouse button is touched or is down, we want you being Gdevelop to do something, right? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring that bolt to come out of the point that we had made. Remember, we added a point to the blaster, so we're going to click add action. We're going to go to common actions for all object, and then we're going to go to create an object. So we're going to click here. And then the object that we want to create is this blast. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click on this blue button here to get this X position. We're going to go all the way up. We're going to go to common expressions for all. We're going to go down to position. And then we're going to select X position. So now when we click this, we have this object. The object that we want the X position of is our blaster. So now we'll click done. We could copy and paste this here. I'm going to click here, go to this blue button, go back up, common expressions for all, position, Y position is time, left click, and then select blaster. Then click done. So the reason why I did that was we got this little piece of code right here, right? In these two pieces of code, we need to go right after the period. We need to put capital P, then OINT for point. We then need to click inside of these parentheses, hold shift, put a quotation, and we're going to put SP and then quotation. The reason why we're doing that is so that this code is going to tell this blast to be made right on the that point that we made for the blaster. So the same thing here. Now when we put in this point, this is something that when we put this point in, so I just put in capital P, point. Gdevelop knows what's going on here when we do that. The thing that we're putting in that we wrote was SP. So I'm holding shift, putting quotation, SP. I had said we're doing this because it made me think like shooting point. So now we'll click OK. Okay, so to have the blast move, we want to go to Add Action. We're going to go to Common Actions for All. We're going to go to Movement. Then we're going to go to Add a Force Angle. We want to add this force angle to a blast. Then we want this blast to come out from our blaster. So we're going to click the blue button. We're going to go up to the top, Common Expressions for All. We're going to click Angle. Click on Angle again. Then what's the object that we want the angle for? We're going to left click, and then we're going to select Blaster. Then we're going to click Done. So now this is going to show us how fast this comes out. So what we're going to do is click here, putting a setting of 400 for the speed. So the blast is going to come out at 400 pixels per second. And then we have these two options here, instant as well as permanent. We want to left click on permanent and then click OK. Okay, so we click the preview button. Now when we left click on the mouse, we can see that we have this blast coming out. However, it's too much. So I'm going to click this X button to come out of that preview window. Okay, when you saw that stream coming out of the blaster, that was because there was too many blasts coming out whenever we click the left button. One of the ways we can deal with that is we can add a timer in. The timer will control the blast in between each blast that comes out of our blaster. So to do that, we're going to click here. So we're clicking in the same event as our touch or left mouse button is down. Then we're going to click Add Condition. We're looking for timers and time. We're going to select value of a scene timer. This time in seconds is going to be the time in between each blast. If we put something like 2 seconds, that would be too slow. We're going to put in a setting of 0.085. And then for the timer's name, we're going to put in our own name. So we're going to hold Shift, press quotation, ST, and then hold Shift, then quotation. This is short for shoot timer. And I'm putting ST instead of just writing out shoot timer for the sake of the tutorial, just for time. If you think it would help you to better understand putting something like shoot timer, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click OK. Okay, so what's going to happen now is in between a blast, there's going to be 0.085 seconds. A blast. How do we have it so that there is 0.085 seconds in between each blast? To do that, we need to add an action that tells the timer to reset. All right, so we're going to click Add Action, Timers and Time. And then we're going to go to Start or Reset a Scene Timer. We're going to left click here. This one's the name. I left click here. Now I'm holding Shift. I'm going to put in not control, quotations, ST, which is what we named the timer. hold shift, then put quotations. Then I'm going to click OK. Okay, so what we're going to do now is click the preview button. So now when I'm holding down the left mouse button, you can see we have, something that looks like it should. I can also just left click once and we have a blast coming out, or I can hold the button down and we have those blasts coming out, and that's that 0.085 in between each blast. However, we need to set things up so we can actually aim our blaster. So let's do that. So I'm going to click this X button to go out of that preview. Okay, so we're working with this event where the player is not moving. So we want to make a sub event of this. So we're going to click here. When I say here, we're clicking like near the bottom of this whole event here, which is composed of a condition as well as an action. We have this highlight going around the whole thing. Because we have that, we're going to click the plus button here. That makes a sub event that's a sub event of this right here. If we had clicked here, by the way, if you're like, why are you saying all that? If we clicked here, we would make a sub event of this. We want, and then this sub event would be dependent upon, one of these things. We want this sub event to be dependent upon just the fact that the player is not moving. For the condition, we don't want a condition other than the fact that of our event where the player is not moving. So we're going to click add action. We're going to go to common action for all. We're going to go down to angle. We're going to select rotate towards a position. What do we want to rotate towards the position? That is our blaster. For this X position, we're going to click this blue button. We're going to go up to where we see the mouse cursor. We're going to left click here. We're going to select cursor X position. And then we're going to click done. So now we're going to do the same thing for this position. We're going to click the blue button. We're going up till we see mouse cursor. Here's the mouse cursor. We're going to left click here, select cursor Y position, and then click done. This setting right here is fine how it is, so we're going to click OK. Okay, so what did that do? We'll click the preview button. So now we see that when we move our cursor, our blaster moves when we move our cursor. If I push the left mouse button, we see our blast coming out. However, there's an issue because see how the blasts are coming out? We don't want that. We want them coming out like this. So on this angle, they look okay. When they go like that, they don't look okay. So now we need to work to have this work correctly. So I'm going to click this X button to get out of this preview. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to have our blasts have the same angle as our blaster. So how do we do that? This event right here, this is one event. This one event has two conditions and three actions. However, this is all one event. We're going to add yet another action to this event. So we're going to click add action. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to common action for all objects. We're going to angles. We're going to left click on angle. Then we're going to go to angle. And then the angle that we want to work with is our blast. So it says change the angle of rotation of an object. That's our blast. For the modification sign, we're going to click here, set this to equal. And then for this setting, we're going to go to the blue button. We're going to go up to the top, select common expressions for all objects, angle, angle again. Then we're going to click here and we're going to select blaster. Then we're going to click done. So what this is going to do is this is going to make our blast have the same angle as our blaster. So let's click OK. Okay, so now when we go to our preview button, so now you see that when our blaster turns, our blaster in the correct angle with our blaster, which is good. So I'm going to click the X button to come out of that preview. Okay, I'm going to click the preview button again. Okay, so while this is working fine, let me move our player character over. You see this? So that the blaster is shooting correctly. However, it looks very strange that our player character doesn't turn this way. So here, this looks fine. However, here, this doesn't look fine. So let's work on that now. So I'm going to click this X button to come out of that preview window. Okay, the way we're going to deal with this is we're going to click on our main event. When I say main event, I mean the fact that our character isn't moving. With this clicked on, we're going to click this add a sub event menu. Then we're going to go to add condition. We're going to go to common conditions for all objects. We're going to go to angle. And then we're going to select angle. And then for this, what this is going to be is it says compare the angle of the specified object. This is going to be our blaster. And for the sign of the test, we want this to be greater than. And then for this setting, what we want here is for this to be 90 degrees. So we're going to click OK. All right, so now what we're going to want is when this angle of the blaster is more than 90 degrees, what we want is we want our player to flip. So what we're going to do is we're going to click add action. We're going to go to sprite, effects, and then flip the object horizontally. So this is going to be the player. So for this, what we want this to be as far as activate flipping, we want this to be yes. So then with that done, we're going to click OK. Okay, so we're going to need pretty much the opposite of this. So what we're going to do is click on our players moving. We're going to click the add a sub event button. And what we're going to do is we're going to left click here, selecting this entire sub event. We're then going to right click, select copy. Then we're going to left click here on this sub event. And you can see this is highlighted blue, right? There's no condition or action yet. We're going to click in this, white part right here, right click, then select paste. So what we have now is we have, this sub event copied to here, which is what we want. Okay, this is very similar to when we were doing our animation for our player or walking. As far as this, instead of us pressing a key to make the animation, the object flip, we're using the angle of the blaster. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to double click here. We're going to change this to less than. The rest of the settings are fine. We're going to click OK. And then for this flip the player horizontally, we're going to double click here. And we're going to select no and then click OK. We could have clicked right here as well. I just chose to go in and change that to no. Okay, now we'll click the preview button. So I'll make the character walk to the side. So we'll fire the gun, the blaster. Now when the character gets to this side, you can see how the character flips. If we go back and forth, we can see the character changes with our mouse. However, there is an issue because you see that the blaster is upside down. So we don't want that. So we'll click this X button, come out of that preview. And it's fairly simple to deal with. What we're going to do is left click here. So we're clicked on this action. We're going to right click, select copy. Then we're going to click here, hover over this add action. When I say clicked here, I just meant clicked on the white part of the sub event. We're going to hover right over the add action words, right click, and then select paste. Okay, so now for this here, we're going to do the same thing. When I say this, I mean a second sub event, except this is the less than 90 degrees. We're going to right click, select copy, left click to have this highlighted blue, hover over the add action, right click, and then select paste. Okay, so with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to double click. We're going to set this to blaster. We also have this set for flip the object horizontally. We want to change this to flip the object vertically. The rest of this is fine, so we'll click OK. We'll do the same thing here. We'll double click, select blaster, change this from flip the object horizontally to flip the object vertically. This is fine, so we'll click OK. Okay, so with that done, we'll click the preview button. I'll press to make the character walk to the right. So now the character fires. Then we turn here. We can see that the blaster is facing the correct direction. Okay, we have this event right here. Let's add a sound effect. We have two conditions, 4 actions. We're going to add another action. So we're going to click Add Action. We're going to go to Audio. We're going to go to Play a Sound. We're going to go to this paintbrush right here. We're going to click on these words to say Create/Edit a sound effect with JFXR. This is a built-in sound editor. Yep. Sorry, hope that didn't, get you there with that sound effect. If I click this laser, each time I click here, there'll be a different sound effect. These sound effects are also listed right here, so I can go back to them. I like that one right there, so I'm going to click here. Name this Blast. S, short for blast sound. And then I'll click Save. I don't want this to be repeated, so I'm going to click No. And then I'll click OK. Okay, so let's see how this sounds. So we're going to click the preview button. And it sounds correct. So I'm going to click the X button to close that preview. So what's going on here is we have all of these, we have these two conditions as well as all of these events. So this timer is controlling all of this right here. So because the sound is in, with these other actions, it's working along with this camera, this timer here. And it works well because as the blasts come out, the sound effects match those blasts coming out. Okay, so we have things set up where when we move the mouse, the blaster follows the mouse. We have sound effects for the blaster. We have our character turn when the mouse turns. Now what we want to do is we want to make it so that we have when the character fires the blaster, so there's a shake to the character when the character fires that blaster. Okay, what we can do is, you see how we have things set up so that as far as our sound, we were able to add the sound in so that the sound worked correctly right along with the actual firing of the blast coming out of the blaster. What we're going to do is left click right here. So we have this entire event highlighted, right? We're going to add a sub event by going to our add a sub event button. So we'll click here. So now we have this sub event. This sub event is dependent on this right here. This sub event will also work with this right here. When I say this, I mean this entire event, which the main thing controlling this event is this when you touch or have the left mouse button down. So we're going to add our action to here to have our blaster shake as a sub event. So when this action happens, that will cause our action, the action of our sub event to happen that we're about to set up now. So I'm going to left click here so that this is selected, this being our sub event connected to our event right here. Okay, what we're going to do is click on this sub event. We're going to click add action. We're going to go to common action for all objects. We're going to then go to movement. We're going to look to where you see add a force. The force that we want to work on is our player. So we're going to left click on our player. We're going to left click here, go to this blue button. We're going to look for random. We're going to left click on random. We're then going to look for a random integer in range. For this setting, we're going to put in minus 100. For this setting, we're going to put in 100. We're then going to click done. We're going to left click here and then left click on the blue button. We're going to look for random. We're going to left click on random, look for random integer in range. For this setting, we're going to put in minus 100. For this setting, we're going to put in 100. We're then going to click done. This setting with it being instance is good. So now we're going to click OK. Okay, so let's click the preview button and see what, how this works out. So I'm going to walk to the right some. So you see when we're shooting our blaster, if you look, our character is actually shaking. Hopefully that's not blowing out your speakers. You can see the character has a shake to when the character shoots. So when the character is just standing there, there's not a shake, and then when the blaster is firing, the character shakes. So I'm going to click this X button to come out of this preview. Look at that blast. For me, that sounds kind of loud. So what we can do is we can go to this play sound. We can double click here. And then we see we have this setting here. So we have 0 to 100. So what we can do is click here. Let's try changing this to 20. Then we'll click OK. Now I'm going to click this preview button. Yeah, it sounds better to me. So that's at 20. I come out of here. I'm going to double click again. I'm going to change this to 5. I'm going to click OK. Then go to the preview button. Yeah, I like the volume at 5. I'm going to click this X button to come out of that preview window. Okay, currently this is the best way that I could think of as far as working with a blaster weapon like we have here. There are issues. One of the issues, I'm going to click the preview button. One issue is we can only fire the projectile weapon when the character is standing still. Another thing is I wanted to initially put an arm. I actually have a sprite set up for an arm to go on here. An arm goes over the projectile weapon. However, it's hard to position that arm. As far as like adjusting the points, and what I wanted the arm to do was when you move this mouse up as well as down, for the arm to move with it. There is another, and the biggest issue is like when we go left and right, that looks very good right there. However, if I go like this, things go correctly. But when I go up this area right here, from here to here, our character stays. So like this, things are good. But this area right here, and currently I'm not sure how to deal with that issue. Okay, we're near the end of this tutorial. However, I am going to try to show you how to put the arm on. So what we're going to do is click on this event right here. We're going to click to make a new sub-event. Okay, so that looks like right here. So with this sub-event made, I'm going to go to new scene. I'm going to click plus. I'm going to go to sprite. I'm going to name this arm, G for arm grip. I'm going to click this plus button to the right, this plus button to the left. I'm then going to go to where my arm is at. I'm going to click here, click open. Now I'm going to click apply. So here's the arm. I'm going to left click once, left click and drag this out. The arm is too big. I'm going to position this here, hold shift, grab this corner to shrink the arm. Then I have the arm pretty much there. Now, I don't want to leave it here, but I just have it here mainly to have the size. It'd be nice if I could just leave it there. So we're actually going to hold them in a mouse button. I'm going to put the arm up here out of view. I'm going to go back to events. So we have this sub event connected to when the player is not moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click here, right on this action. I'm going to right click, select copy. Then here's our sub event. I'm going to left click here, right click, select paste. So we have put the blaster around the player, we have the blaster there, right? So what we're going to do is double click here. We're going to change this to the arm. Then we're going to click OK. So now let's select play. And now you can see that that arm is over the gun. So that helps things. You can have the arm move with the blaster. However, there's issues as far as getting the pivot point correct. So now when we go this way, we need to set up that arm to change so that the arm flips with our blaster as well. Okay, and that's actually fairly simple to set up. And the reason why is we can go to where we have this already set up. And these are the visual programming conditions as well as events to have things flip when the mouse moves. So we're going to go to this flip horizontal player. We're going to left click here, right click, select copy, and then go right to this action. I'm going to click here to highlight that whole sub event. Then I'm going to write over these words. I'm going to right click, then select paste. Now I'm clicking here on this other event. I'm going to go to this flip horizontal player where we have the no flipping. I'm going to left click here, right click, select copy. I'm going to click here for this whole sub event, hover over the add action, right click, and then select paste. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to double click here. We're going to change this to arm. This is fine. We're going to click OK. We're then going to double click here, change this to arm. The rest of this is fine. We're going to click OK. Okay, so with that done, we're going to click on this preview button. So now when we go to the other side, we can see that arm is still out in front. So with that done, we can, oh, wait a second. That's interesting. Okay, I see. So we need to set things up so that when the player moves. Okay, so we need to go to player is moving. We have this. So what we're going to do is left click here, right click, select copy, click here, right click, select paste. So then now we're going to double click here. We're going to change this to arm. The rest of that is good. We're then going to click OK. Okay, so what we're going to do is click the preview button. So now when we walk, we have our arm. Oh, let's see. Okay, so now our arm is not there. So we'll click here. So what we have to do for that is the arm is there, then it disappears. We need to just have the arm come back. So see where we have this player is moving. So 0 equals invisible, 255 equals visible. So we'll left click here, right click, select copy, left click here. When I say here, I'm talking about this first sub event, the conditions as well as the actions. I'm going to right click right on add a condition, then select paste, and then I'm going to double click here, change this to arm. These other settings are fine. I'm then going to click OK. Okay, so with that set up, we're going to click the preview button. So our arm is there, so we walk. Okay, so our player can walk with his blaster weapon up. Okay, so when we jump. Okay, so for that we have this here. So we're going to left click to select here, right click, then select copy, left click here, right click on add an action, select paste, double click here, then select arm. The rest of this is fine. We'll then click OK. Okay, so now with that set up, let's click the preview button. So now when our character jumps, the character walks fine, the character shoots fine. Okay, so this is good. Okay guys, that's it for the tutorial. For all of those of you out there who like the videos on this channel and we share them, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel and you would like to see more, please subscribe and thank you for viewing.